Hi, welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, joined here today by my friend Josh Reed, all the way from Alaska. How you doing, Josh?
I'm doing great, Ken. How you doing?
Life couldn't be better in a lot of ways, I guess. But anyway, we've got some serious problems for the Ravens this week with a combination of COVID outages, with Humphrey for certain, six other players still waiting to see if they can get back and play on Sunday. In addition to that, the injuries that have occurred on the offensive line in particular, uh, other injuries at cornerback that have happened all through the season have left the Ravens a little short-handed. And you just wrote a piece about that.
Oh, actually, yeah, I wrote a couple pieces during the bye week specifically. Fortunately, it was before the trade deadline. It talked about moves that Ravens should and could make during the bye week. Among those were signing a slot corner. I really wish they would have did a signing or trading for a slot corner. I really wish they would have did that beforehand, so it would have been available for this game. But hindsight is 2020. Other things I wrote about was about the signing or trading for a third string tight end, to fill that Hayden Hurst role. Obviously, trading's off the table, but I did write a couple pieces about some potential veteran free agents that they could target for Maryland Sports Block.
Okay, so uh, slot corner I've been touting as the Ravens' biggest need lately. So I still really believe it is. The Ravens are so thin, they really can't even field a proper dime defense right now. They're also short of safety on the back end. They only have apparently two guys that they're willing to play at safety. Levine, for whatever reason, is not. They're not willing to play him there. They'd rather play Chris Board as kind of a proxy safety for the third guy. They have Nigel Warrior and they have Geno Stone, both on the practice squad. Neither of them have been elevated, even to make use of the free elevations that are available.
Yeah, that was a little perplexing to me. I understand the Geno Stone thing. You still think the guy was ready, you want to have him some more time to develop. But the Nigel Warrior thing really kind of threw me for a loop just because all the reports coming in the training camp was that the guy was out there making plays, and I was listening to the defensive notes podcast that you put out earlier this week, and I think with Aaron Kansas was saying how like sometimes he'll make some plays but then he'll be out of position at times. And you kind of don't want that liability up on the active roster, so. I understand that, but that's why I've been banging the table for bringing in a veteran. That's why I wrote a piece earlier this year about how a reunion with Brandon Carr makes too much sense.
Yeah, I think it really does make sense now in terms of all the ways it can help. Right now, the Ravens are using Jimmy Smith as the versatile guy that can move between corner and safety. And my problem with all of that is depending on over dependence on Jimmy Smith is dangerous. That he's proven time after time that he's a big injury risk. And I don't think you want to have him be the front. He's outstanding when he's on the field. He's been great at cornerback. He's been passable at safety. He's been, a guy who's certainly helped the team, I think, back there. But I think having Brandon Carr being able to do both roles would also be very, very useful right now.
Yeah, and then the fact that Brandon Carr has experience doing both roles, doing that dual role like he did last year for the Ravens. Like I said in my piece, or like weeks ago, even before the Marlon Humphrey thing had happened with the COVID, and before some of the other injuries that happened to Anthony Averett, that it just makes too much sense not to happen. I mean, a guy who's familiar with the system, familiar with like I said, with the guys, he knows how to. It won't take him long to gel with this team because he pretty much knows everybody on the team. He knows Wink's defense, and like I said, it'd be a seamless transition. I feel like, and it makes too much sense not to happen.
Right, I agree. And if you look at where the Ravens have fallen down in terms of that slot corner coverage, it's on short routes. So short routes where zone coverage understanding of responsibilities coming out of a bunch formation, how you aggressively attack a slant, all the things that don't take long speed, which Brandon Carr probably doesn't have at this point in his career, that don't take anything but some savvy press ability at the line of scrimmage and just an understanding of where he's supposed to go from that point. I think Anthony Levine in 2018 certainly wasn't the fastest guy on the field, but he had the best year ever by a dime safety because he understood what his responsibilities were and could really impact the throwing lane.
Yeah, I also think like where a guy like Brandon Carr would be excellent. Like just going back to the Steelers game, like like you guys mentioned in your defensive notes podcast, there are a few third and shorts there where you're like, oh my
Hmm.
gosh, if a guy was just had this that little veteran instinct, like that kind of awareness to like, oh, let me go ahead and press a little harder there, or like, hey, like I was screaming at the TV like, hey, they're gonna run a screen to Juju, they're gonna run a screen to Juju, they're gonna always try to use little rub routes and little like kind of like Patriots esque kind of little like non-offensive pass interference things, but to get the ball in the receiver's hands pretty quickly. Now, I'm like if a guy like Brandon Carr was there, more so than like a Terrell Bonds or even somebody else who's a little less inexperienced, I feel like he might have sniffed that out, or just you could use him in those situations going forward, just because he has that veteran savvy.
Yeah, Bond's certainly better speed than Carr, and he may be quicker to react. He may have better skates at this point in terms of making his first movement. But Bonds certainly was not the big body they needed to get off of some of those rubs and and disaffect what was going on there. Anyway, it was frustrating to watch. But let's hear who you have in mind, though. Besides Brandon Carr, who else would be a decent slot corner opportunity?
Another guy, former first round pick of the New York Giants, Eli Apple. He's been released by a couple of teams, most recently the Panthers. Like I said, he's bounced around, but like I said, he's still a starting caliber slot corner. I wouldn't trust him on the outside ever, but I feel like he's a guy that could be real serviceable at least in the slot. Like I said, there's the way that Wink Martindale kind of rolls out his defense. He can really puts guys in the position to succeed to the best of their abilities, not necessarily to always fit the scheme. Like, okay, this guy may not be the perfect scheme fit, but let's maximize what he can do well. And I feel like a guy like Eli Apple, like I said, as long as he's not covering somebody deep downfield on the perimeter, he'll be a nice addition.
Okay, see, he's to me, he's awfully big for a slot corner. He's 6'1", 203, and I would have trouble believing he's going to be able to adapt to that position. As far as I know, he's always played outside in his pro career, right?
Yeah, I believe when he was with the Saints, they had him. Maybe just because they had him matching up over some bigger receivers in the slot. That was the reason. But I do remember them seeing him in the slot a couple times with when he was with the Saints. Like they've been rotating through former Giant corners like crazy. They got Jack Rabbit Jenkins there right now too. So maybe they were just using him wrong. But that's just one of the top guys I saw available on the free agent market. Another guy. The Ravens are bringing in for a visit would be Tremont Williams, a little long in the tooth for my taste. But like I said, I did mention in my pieces earlier that it behoove Eric DeCosta to find somebody with some starting experience, and there's nobody has more starting experience on the market right now than Tremont Williams.
All right, and how much has Williams played on the inside in his career?
He's been moved around a lot. But from his time with Green Bay to when he was with Cleveland. I'm not sure exactly how much time he spent inside, but I know he has experience at pretty much everywhere on the secondary, including at safety.
All right. Um, okay. Well, then he's in that medium height range, that 5'11" range. My recollection is he's played mostly outside, but that doesn't mean he couldn't play slot. And also, it's not like the Ravens are in a position to be choosers at this point. They're beggars, and they really need to find a guy who can play somewhere effectively, whether it's on the boundary, and then hope it works out in the slot, maybe. But maybe that even means one of Bonds or Dorsey is your slot corner. But they're short an outside corner now too at this point with Humphrey gone this week.
Yeah, that's why I actually I had a few practice squad poaching possibilities, and one of them was bringing back Josh Nurse. I know he's one of your favorite aircraft carrier guys that you've mentioned
Yes.
in the preseason. I know he wouldn't help us at slot corner, but just having the extra insurance at outside corner, and if that guy's familiar with the system, spent training camp with the Ravens. I mean, but he in order for them to do that, they'd have to sign him to their active roster from Jacksonville's practice squad. So I'm not sure if they're willing to do that for a guy who hasn't been in the building since August.
Yeah, I'm. It wouldn't be a terrible idea. I mean, it would. It's not the end of the world in terms of the length of the commitment, and the Ravens are at a point in the season where they're starting to build up some bodies that are not able to go right now. And even in the case of Colon Castillo, they brought a guy onto the roster to try and protect him, even though they deactivated him, which was really odd to me at the time. But they had the room to do it, so they decided, I guess they could. All right, let's move on from slot corner. So there's a few options, a few names. Sounds like we're getting a few outside corner names in there, which is fine. But Brandon Carr still being a slot corner seems to be a reasonable choice. What other positions do you want the Ravens to look at right now in terms of available guys?
Mostly offensive tackle and like the third string tight end. We covered those guys kind of like when I was on your podcast before. Guys like Delaney Walker, Charles Clay, Ed Dixon, and then maybe some practice squad poaching. But mostly at at offensive tackle right now, just because now that Fluker's the starting right tackle, and up to this point in the season, I don't even think Will Holden has been active for a game. So I'm not
No,
sure
he
if they,
hasn't.
yeah, I'm not sure if they want to really put their eggs in that basket. So I think they might really want to target one of these free agent tackles that are on the market right now.
Right. A lot of teams have given Will Holden a shot and it hasn't worked out. It's interesting. The Ravens are in dire need right now. We kind of projected that this might happen in a COVID year, is that, linemen were going to be in scarce supply and we're going to be digging pretty far down the street depth. And, it's November and they're lucky. They've had this guy on the roster since September. They haven't had him poached yet. They have protected him a couple times, but I think unless they make a move in the next, day, they're probably going to end up with Will Holden on the active roster here.
Yeah, that's what it's shaping up to be. Like I said, it should say something that in the weeks they haven't protected him, that he still hasn't been poached. That should tell you what the rest of the league thinks
Hmm.
about this guy. So
Yeah. And even so, they go unprotected for a day between the end of the game and on Tuesday when you reprotect players. So even the protected guys have a chance to be poached if they're consistently taken or protected every week. So you don't have a you don't have a you haven't locked the player down for multiple weeks just because you protect him. You just lock him down for that week. In any case, that's I think you mentioned a couple of older guys who are still sticking around: Cordy Glenn,
yeah,
Kyle Long.
yep. Those two guys would be the most experienced guys. I know at this point in their careers, I think they'd be more acceptable to a swing tackle role, just because they know the nature of the business and that you're really a play away from being inserted into the starting lineup. So I think at this time of the year, the guys who've been holding out for possible starting jobs might be a little bit more reluctant to sign for to be a swing tackle somewhere, just because they know that they have that insurance that, like, okay, I'll be on somebody's roster in the event that either A, somebody gets hurt like Ronnie Stanley did on this past Sunday, or B, somebody catches COVID, like or gets put on the COVID list like Trent Williams was for the 49ers this past Thursday.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, you can. It doesn't even have to be an injury. It can be an illness, and it doesn't even have to be an illness. It can be you got too close to a guy who was sick. So it's a even more knife edge of a opportunity for a lot of these guys who are on the fringe of rosters right now. It'd be interesting to see what a player like Cordy Glenn, for instance, would be willing to sign for. He was brought in, I think, to Cincinnati last year as the savior for their offensive line, and they paid him some money, and it didn't work out.
Yeah, I think they traded like a first round pick to acquire him from Buffalo, and then like I said, he was just. I mean, the whole offensive line was garbage last year, but him especially, you'd think he'd be the one, I guess,
Decent.
yeah, decent piece of that line, and like I said, it was a collective just collapse from the entire offense all year long.
All right, let's go back to tight end for a second because that's a position where a lot of people are saying the Ravens' mojo is gone in part because of the missing threat of having a third receiving tight end on the field. And I'm counting Boyle in that group, but I'm not counting Ricard in that group. And they've done the impossible and basically gone the whole season with having only two tight ends plus Ricard active for each game.
Yeah, like I said, they've done it, and but like I said, it's been almost to their detriment. When like even Dan Orlovsky, I had seen him on Twitter earlier this week, pointed out that all the Ravens fans clamoring for the Ravens to add another receiver isn't what they need. They're really missing Hayden Hurst, that third tight end. And as much as I love J.K. Dobbins, and even more so after this big game he had against Pittsburgh, you really kind of like, man, if only they could have traded something else for somebody else to get that second round pick, not Hayden Hurst, because like you said, hindsight is 2020, and they're really missing that presence both as a receiver and as a second level blocker at the third tight end spot.
Yeah, so he was one of the players I was promoting the Ravens to reacquire at the trade deadline because I thought that the cost should not be that much. Atlanta, in the position they're in, might trade him again for a 4 or a 5, probably a 4 would be my guess right now. Atlanta now is going to be in a position next year where they have to rebuild, so they're probably not going to be in a position where they can sign Hurst to a big deal, and it's just not he's not at the proper cycle they want for a player they're starting out. As much as he's got a couple of years left on his first contract, he's not exactly where is ideal for the Falcons. And maybe the Ravens could make the deal a little sweeter by not picking up his fifth year option and having that be part of the agreement of him coming back. and get him back for a little bit less from the Falcons, or they could have done that. That time has passed. But I didn't really buy any of the stuff that people were saying that Hurst would not want to come back to the Ravens when he's on a 1-6 Falcons team.
Yeah, no, like they say, winning usually cures all woes, and if a guy can come back to a position, to a place in a position where he's had, some moderate amount of success, I think he'd be open to that. If they're being 5-2 is way better than being 2-6. So,
There you go. There you go. Okay, well then some of the do you have any guys on the practice squad that you like anywhere else? Any street talent that's still out there at tight end, or is it all some of the older guys that you're primarily on right now?
two guys that I jotted down, there were potential practice squad poaching would be a guy like Seth the Valve, who's with the Panthers right now. The Ravens haven't never had him on their roster, but like they're familiar with him from his time with Cleveland. They've seen
Right.
this guy. They've seen this guy on the field a lot. He could be poached off of the Carolina Panthers practice squad. A guy like Jeff Kroom from Philadelphia. They said he just caught a touchdown on the Ravens on a blown coverage. I believe that was the Week 6 game. It was, and that was number 81 for the Eagles. If people weren't familiar with that, that was the one that Carson Wentz hit. I think it was wide open in the right corner of the end zone. And then still a couple other guys like the Caleb Wilson also on the Eagles, and then Hakeem Butler on the Eagles. Like the Eagles have a lot of tight ends or tight end types that the Ravens could possibly be poached. And those two franchises are pretty familiar with one another. But like, there's not really too much out there outside of like the guys we've mentioned at nauseam before, and Delaney Walker, Charles Clayton, Ed Dixon, the former Raven. But it's real slim
Okay.
pickings out there.
The guy I like that you named was DeValve, and in a lot of ways he matches, I think, what the Ravens would want in a tight end. He's got some quickness, but certainly not speed. He's not definitely not going to be an inline blocker. He's 6'3", 245, smallish for a tight end, but he's been a pretty dependable receiver. He's caught a little bit lower than you like at tight end at 63.2% of his passes, but he's had a good yards per target for his career at 7.7. So he's the kind of guy I think that probably would fit into the Ravens, play action schemes as the third guy. He could do some of that level 2 and level 3 blocking that the Ravens look for their tight ends to do in some significant degree. It's not a bad idea. He actually has a fair amount of total NFL playing time. He's played in 53 games with 60 receptions and 33 being his high in 2017 with Cleveland. I think there. I hear a lot of players proposed, and DeValve sounds like one of the most reasonable fringe options that there would be out there.
Yeah, and that's why I mentioned him first and foremost when I was talking about the practice squad poaching, just because like I know the Ravens are familiar with him. They know what that guy's capable of. I think he caught quite a few. I think I would say quite a few seam balls on the Ravens when he played with the Browns. Like I said, he could be a nice little, like he's a really underrated receiver for a guy who's kind of been around the league for a little bit. And I think he'd be a decent addition, especially at the third tight end spot. You really don't need a whole like the third tight end spot for the Ravens is it's not a glamorous position, but it's an essential position to
Mm-hmm.
where like it really kind of helps that offense be multidimensional and run some of that 13 personnel was really their bread and butter last year, made their passing game and running game so unpredictable.
Yeah. Secret sauce. That's definitely was what I heard it called a lot, and I think that's a fair thing. And if you run out of the pistol and you run out of that diamond formation in the backfield, which has essentially usually Ricard on one side and another tight end on the other, it was Hurst last year a lot. Then it's really an option for that player to not necessarily block at level one because he usually releases either for a play action pass or for an opportunity to make a block in level 2 or level 3. So the blocking responsibilities, the point I'm making, are not that great for this guy. So it's okay if you're looking. Always what I was intrigued by. Bill James would say, what marginal qualities can I live with given the ballpark we play in? And the marginal qualities given the Ravens system that they can live with are probably a little bit less speed and a little bit less blocking ability because most of what they're trying to do is get somebody into a hole in play action coverage and oftentimes against zone defense.
Yeah, I mean, all you really need is a guy who can probably get a nice little seal block, or just like maybe like get a nice little cut block and spring your running back into the second, third level. And like I said, it's not like we're asking for that big inline blocker like or like who's pretty much a sixth offensive lineman. You really just need somebody that can probably pick up another block and pose at least a viable threat in the passing game more so than your fullback would.
All right. Now, there's been a lot of other talk around here anyway of people trying to get Miles Boykin converted to tight end. I'm not really in favor of that, but I understand that his value as a blocker as well. Do you have anything to say about that?
I'm not a fan of that either. Like it's funny when people say that because like coming into the draft, Chase Claypool, who we just saw caught a touchdown against the Ravens, people wanted him to kind of be like a tight end receiver hybrid, and as you can see, you know there's no need for that. He's the kind of guy that when you have a guy that's that athletic, you don't want to kind of almost limit him by playing tight end. Darren Waller was a different case for the Ravens because he was you could tell if that guy put on some more weight, he could be a dynamic tight end. Whereas Miles Boykin has shown if given opportunity and with given some more time to kind of get into rhythm with Lamar, he can be a viable receiver. And so the whole the putting weight on Miles Boykin and converting him to tight end, I'm not on that boat.
Okay, me either. All right. Anything else? Any other player out there that you like at any of these positions you want to talk about before we call it a show?
There were two guys at slot corner who I mentioned some taller guys, but two actual guys who fit the slot corner mold would be a BW Webb, career journeyman. He's been with a different team every year. He's been in the league, but he fits that slot corner role. He's had a handful of starts under his belt, and then Javen Elliott, he kind of fits that mold too. Under 6 feet, those two under 6 feet guys with some starting experience in their belt. I think Javen Elliott spent most of his time with the Carolina Panthers before signing with the Bucks last year, and I think they're both free agents. They're both on the market. So if you don't feel, I mean, they're all indications from the Ravens have been they have the utmost faith in Bonds and Dorsey right now. They've earned opportunities, but at what point do you kind of like okay, ship's kind of sailing these guys? We need somebody with a little bit more experience to come in here and perform this job for us.
Right. So that is, I think, that's the decision at a couple of positions for the Ravens right now, because obviously it's not an issue anymore with Fluker playing right tackle, but there are a lot of people calling for Fluker to say play right guard. But when they have three young guys, I think one of the things they were trying to do is develop one of them because it'll solve a lot of their youth needs, as they grow into maturing into these second contract guys. They need to have some offsetting cheap positions covered, and right guard was one they could have possibly had. That may be a reason not to go after a player like BW Webb. And I'm not saying it isn't, because I'm for bringing in Brandon Carr. For God's sake, he'll be here for 1 year and that'll be it. And same thing probably for Webb. But in the case of having Bonds and Dorsey available, if one of them, and now they're both, the clock has started on both of them. But if you found out you had a player in either one of them due to this, emergency situation right now, you'd really have something for next year.
Yeah, and like I said, the Ravens always give their in-house guys the first crack at it before they go and get some reinforcements. I wrote one of the other pieces I wrote about the bye week was about benching Tyree Phillip just because like how much do you want to give this guy a chance to develop until it becomes a detriment to your team and you're not really running as efficient of an offense as you can because you're not really clicking on all cylinders. Now some of it is on Lamar, but another part of that does boil down to blocking.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think Phillips, honestly, before he got hurt, was really any worse than any of the other options, is what it really amounts to. So they knew McCary hadn't played well already, and he certainly didn't play well against Pittsburgh after Phillips left. And then they have had Powers for a long time. They haven't given him a shot. They've been letting McCary play ahead of him, who hasn't been playing well. So my question was, who was really better? And maybe the answer was Fluker was better, but and honestly, uh, you know, there's something that is wrong with Powers, or we would have seen him already get the real opportunity.
Yeah, my piece that I wrote about it, it was of course before the Ronnie Stanley injury that I was talking about Fluker possibly being the most likely candidate to replace Phillips after
Hmm.
the bye week. As we know, that's not going to be the case because now it's going to be a starting right tackle.
Yep. All righty. Josh, thanks for joining us here. Tell people where they can find your work.
You can find all my work at marylandsportsblog.com. Under the Ravens section, I cover any and all things Ravens.
All right. Really good knowledge, obviously, and going through the trouble to go through all the practice squad possibilities out there on these various tight ends and the slot corners is terrific. We really appreciate you joining us, Josh. Join us next week. Usual array of shows. We'll have the defensive show on Monday. The offensive show. Tapes on Tuesday night. It'll be available on Wednesday morning. We'll have the Know Your Foe. Got a great guest, Mark Schofield for the Patriots, and that'll be done on Wednesday night, available on Thursday morning. So we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.